Here. PIRL Institute 2020, October 19th, 2020, Day 1, Session 2. Yes. Dr. Kometa is one of the leading researchers at the University of Bamenda. We are very delighted that he's able to join us in the PIRL project. He's a member of the steering committee. He's a member of so many other groups. He is really a driving force in this project, and we are very grateful that he is with us. We've asked him to speak today on an overview of doing data analysis, methods of data analysis, but not just about the how-to, but the who we are as researchers. And as I mentioned earlier, it will be an overview session and followed by a panel discussion about doing data analysis. So as you hear Dr. Kometa speak, you will be thinking about things that he might say that would be familiar to you, might be new to you, might be a little bit different to the way that you're thinking. We would really encourage you to make notes, to keep track of your questions. We will not have a lot of time for discussion in this session. But we will have time for discussion later in the day. As I mentioned, the room will be open later. There can be some discussion in the chat as well. And we will hopefully have some time for at least some questions and discussion at the end of this session. So Dr. Kometa, I know I have not given a full introduction of you, but I think you're going to say more about yourself as you do the presentation. So let me just lead you through what you're going to do. You're going to go to the presentation. You're going to go to the view perspective, choose present. And then when you come to present, you just click on the captions icon and the closed captioning will begin. So I'm going to exit from here. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to make Dr. Kometa a co-host so that he can share his screen, and ask you, Dr. Kometa, to share your screen and share the slides with us. And we will walk you through the process if you have any difficulty. Welcome. You just need to unmute yourself. Dr. Kometa, could you unmute yourself, please?
Hello?
Hello. So
can you get me?
Yes, we're getting
Can you get me now?
Yes, we are getting you now. So you can share your screen. You might need to close, it sounds like maybe you have two devices on. You might need to close the audio on one. We're getting some feedback from you. It's good to see you. Now, if you go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a share screen. It might be green. Are you seeing it? Your microphone is off again.
Okay.
Okay, your microphone is on. Are you seeing the share screen option at the bottom of your screen?
I'm saying it, yeah, I'm on it.
Great. So if you click on that,
Okay.
then it will ask you to share. There you go. That's great. Now open the slides in, there we go. Great. And then go to present view. Oh, you you are definitely multilingual. You have it in German, it looks like. So I'm not sure what the German word is. It's at the top. Fichier?
It's in French.
Is it French? I'm having trouble seeing. I guess it's French.
Yeah, fichier.
Okay, so where is the view?
No, it should go
So
to.
you have
go to where you have L leave.
what is affiché? Affiché?
Afficher, yes.
No, go to affiché.
Yes.
Yeah.
Partager.
No, affiché, the third one on the menu. Affiché, the one that starts with A.
Yes, afficher, yes.
Right.
Plein écran.
Let's put that the first
Plein
one.
écran.
Do the lire. Let's see.
I think it's plein écran.
So what do you guys want to do? Maybe we can help.
He wants to present. He wants to put it in presentation mode.
Oh, Leah, I think.
Yeah, that's.
Exactly.
Okay.
Is that okay? Yeah.
And then you click on CC, just underneath the, yeah, click on CC.
CC?
Yes, click on that CC icon. It will be yellow, and then that will be fine. That's great.
You're ready to go now. Thank you. Thank you for all the help.
Okay. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me doing this presentation today for the PIRL project. Like Dr. Lin said before, I am Kometa of the University of Bamenda. I'm the Vice Dean in charge of research and cooperation and a member of the PIRL project. And I want to take this opportunity this morning to maybe welcome everybody who could make it to this institute today. So like Lynn said before, I would be making an overview of data analysis, since that is part of our team that we're having this year for the institute. I will not waste much of your time. I think I'll go straight into the presentation, and thereafter I'll give a break after maybe 1 or 2 slides, and we have a reaction, maybe 5-10 minutes or so, and then I continue. And at the end, we will have questions and answers again. And if you have any questions, you are free to ask. Yeah, Lee?
Dr. Kometa, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there is a little message at the top that says allow Google Slides to have access. No, don't close it.
Oh, sorry.
You want to allow it so that we can have the closed captioning. So go
Okay.
to CC.
Yep.
And
Allow. Okay.
allow.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
It's very stressful, but thank you for persevering.
Okay. Okay. So, what is data analysis? From what I have here, it is basically the use of systematic applications of statistical and logistical techniques to present information that you have. And it is a continuous process of assembling data and trying to sort it in a way that is readable to everybody. Data analysis ensures elimination of unwanted disturbance or noise, let me put it that way, from data structure. That is, you want to have precise information on a particular issue. You go out, you collect data, you try to sort it out so that it gives you a real meaning of what you want to do. It gives you the significance of what you want to do. Data analysis is a scientific research. It ensures that you use statistical skills, and there are so many of them. So many of them when you're doing data analysis. And to do that, you have to ensure that you check for the appropriate data. You check for the availability of the data and the analytical skills that you want to use. Because since there are so many analytical skills, you have to be very precise on what you want to do. You have to be precise on what you want to do because you might be carrying research in particular areas which requires particular skills that you need. It ensures the validity of and reliability of the data source, or ensure that the validity and reliability of the data source that you want to use. What do I mean by ensure validity and reliability? Collect data that can be proven, that can be confirmed, that is reliable. You don't need to go to the field and probably, or maybe you are trying to carry out research on a particular issue and you relate or you bring things which do not reflect what you're doing. It will not be reliable, because when somebody looks at what you have and look at the context under which you're carrying out the research, he might at once know that that particular data is not reliable. Probably you did not really go to the field. So you have to get data that's really reliable and related to what you're working on. Of course, when you're doing data analysis, it is important that it should be significant to what you're investigating. It should be significant to what you're investigating. You don't get data when it's not significant, when you did not hypothesize that when you were stating your problem. So it's always important to ensure the significance of what you're trying to do. What are the methods of data analysis? Of course, like in research, you have quantitative method and qualitative method. It all depends on the type of research you're trying to conduct. And when we talk about quantitative method, you have things like field observations. You have to go to the field, you have to collect the data, you have to conduct interviews, you have to use audios and videos, you have to use tables, charts, graphs, and maps to try to maybe decipher what you want to do, or to maybe give the whys. Why is this happening? What can be done to solve that particular problem? And when we talk about qualitative, we have to conduct experiments, we have to do a survey, we have to do numerical analysis, and there are statistical techniques like the SPSS, the SAS that you can use to analyze your data. When you use these methods, depending on the type of research you're doing, it is easier for you to easily present your data for somebody to read and understand what you are doing and what you intended to do, and to see if your results are significant or not. From the first two slides, I don't know if anybody has any comment or anybody has anything to say or any question to ask.
I will ask a question. This is Lynn.
No problem.
Dr. Kometa, can you say a little bit about, I guess, your perspective? Did you start out as a qualitative researcher or as a quantitative researcher, or were you trained in both from the beginning?
I was trained in both in the beginning. because you might find yourself in situations where you have to use the tool. So it's important to have an idea, have an overview of both concepts, because when you have that, it is easier for you to fit in any research project or any data analysis procedure that you find yourself.
Thank you. Elizabeth is asking, could you go over the difference between qualitative and quantitative briefly, just to make sure that everyone, that I guess that she is clear and that others are clear on the difference between qualitative and quantitative data?
Okay, when we talk about quantitative, we want to answer questions like why, what, how. Those are some of the things that we need to know here. And when we talk about qualitative, we are trying to look at some scaling, some outcomes, scaling from probably trying to put people's perception about certain things. We are trying to conduct experiments, look at the outcome of those experiments, and then have numerical data that we can analyze and interpret.
So experiments with numerical data are quantitative.
Quantitative. Yes, quantitative. Sorry, there was a little mix up. Quantitative is experimental surveys. Sorry, there was a mix up.
That's okay.
Yeah. And then qualitative, we have, yeah, sorry, there was a mix up.
That's okay, go ahead.
Okay. So there are some basic tips when you're doing data analysis. You have to trim your data prior to the analysis, making it easier to focus on the things you want to analyze. Never perform the analysis on a master copy of your data. Your hypothesis should be theoretized not based on the data, but based on what you wanted to find out. Accept that there is no probability of significance. Check assumptions before analyzing your data, and carefully select your analytical tools and techniques. These tips are very important if we want to do data analysis, because if you don't select your analytical tools and techniques carefully, probably you'll be doing a wrong interpretation. For example, we might want to look at a relationship between two things. The statistical analysis will be different compared to if we are doing a comparative study. If we are doing a comparative study, it is different. So it is important to really choose what you want to do and to know exactly what you want to do, and then to know the type of data that you want to collect from the field. So what are the data analytics tools that you can use? The selection of analytical tools depends on the type of data and research. This is again important because there are so many types of research, and there are so many types of data that you will want to collect in the field. So you have to be very precise and have to be very careful on what you want to do and what type of research you're carrying, and then the type of tools you select. Historical, experimental, and explanatory exploratory research present different analytical tools. Again, when you're doing historical research, the tools are different. When you are doing experimental research, the tools are different, and so on and so forth. It is always important. It's always important to know the context or know what you're doing, because when you know what you're doing, it is possible and it's easier for you to know the type of tools that you use in analyzing your data. You can use things like Excel to analyze your data. You can use SPSS to analyze your data. You can use SAS to analyze your data, and you can use R and Python to analyze your data. And let me go further to say that these tools are important. These tools are important because they give you the real meaning of what you want to do. And when we talk about R and Python. What is R and Python? They are both open source programming languages with a large community. R is mainly used for statistical analysis, while Python provides a more general approach to data. And when I talk about A and S is service analysis services. Again, it's another analytical tool that you can use in analyzing your data. SPSS, Excel, I think so many of us are familiar with it. And for SPSS, there are so many versions that you can use. But if you are doing analysis, you should ensure that people know exactly the version and the version you're using. That one is important. Processes of data analysis. Data requirement specification. Define short questions. Define measuring parameters. Outline units of measurement. Again, this is important. This is important, particularly when you're doing measurement. You have to be precise. You have to be precise, giving the measuring parameters and the units of measurement. You cannot mix the units of measurement. If you mix them, probably you have results that, or data that will be giving you answers in this unit and that unit, and it will not be coherent. So we need everything to be coherent. Data collection, gather data, use primary and secondary sources. What do we mean by primary sources? What do we mean by secondary sources? You have to specify that clearly, because primary sources, of course, is data that you collect by yourself, or you collect by yourself, or you ensure that you go to the field and probably using field assistance or whatever, you collect that data yourself. And secondary sources, they are data sources that you can read from somewhere, you can infer from somewhere. Somebody has done it before, and then you go there, get that information that you can use in your own research. Data processing. Organize your data. Like we said before, you have to organize your data. You have to put it in such a way that it can be easily sorted. Cross-check your data. Cross-check what you've collected. Cross-check that everything that you need, everything that you needed is in place, so that it is easy for you to interpret it. Convert your data to scale units. Again, like I said before, we should have a unit. And when you convert it, it is easier for you to use that scale to interpret your data. Eliminate irrelevant data. Yes, I do agree that at times it is important for us to eliminate irrelevant data, but you might eliminate irrelevant data, but at the end of the day, you realize that certain things that you eliminated, you might be needed somewhere. So in as much as it's good to eliminate the irrelevant data, I think it's also good to maybe have a backup somewhere with that irrelevant data there, so that if anything comes up, you might go back there to infer the things you need. Data analysis. Sort, plot, and identify correlations. Of course, when you're doing correlations, when you have to know if you're doing comparison, if you're doing relationships, and so on and so forth. And of course, you should know which data can go for this particular one, which one can you correlate with the next one, and so on and so forth. That is easier. Rethink to modify questions, parameters. Of course, when you get data and you're trying to analyze it, you may see data and then you try to think, if this question was okay, can I rethink the question? Can I reshape the question? Can I rephrase the question in such a way that it's better understood, it's better interpreted to me when I'm doing my data analysis? Make use of different tools available. Of course, in carrying out research, you cannot say precisely or say exactly that I'm going to use just this particular method. No, there are so many methods that you can use. You can use a combination of them. You can use a combination of them to have what you want. That is important. So never think that for any particular research, you will use just one specific type of tools. No, you might use a combination of them. Because at a point in time, you might try to look at relationships and comparisons and so on and so forth. You cannot use the same tool. You might use different types. interpret results, it should be based on the questions. It should be based on the questions that we set in the beginning. It should be based on the questions that we set out to investigate. Review the stated parameters, reviewed if the stated parameters are used. Of course, there were things that you set out in the beginning. You should check if all of them have been consulted. And if they were not consulted, what can be done? What can be done to maybe go back to them, restructure them so that they reflect what you want to do. Techniques of data analysis. There are 3 broad techniques in data analysis. One can be based on mathematics and statistics. And here we have descriptive analysis, dispersion analysis, time series analysis, factor analysis, regression analysis. The second can be based on artificial intelligence or machine learning. Here we have things like decision trees, artificial neural network, and so on and so forth. Then the last one can be based on visualization and graphs, where you can present your data on a map, present your data on a bar chart or on a graph for people to read. That is easier. To me, this one too is very easy, because when you put it on maps, on charts, on scatter plots and things like that, people get to read it better. People get to read it better because they actually see the flow in what people are doing, or the flow in how your results are being presented. See the flow, they answer the questions to you, because if the questions are well stated and you look at the flow map or the chart, of course, you'll be able to know exactly what the results are and what the outcomes have been. Conclusion. Data analysis is the key to any research and business perspective. So to all researchers, you cannot do research without analyzing the data. It's important, because when you analyze the data, it gives you a whole new idea of what is happening, and of course you can make use of that information. Data analysis helps to inform in decision making and minimize human bias. We are trying as much as possible to be as fair as possible. If we don't analyze data properly, it is difficult for us to give a fair conclusion of what we have observed. So it is important for us to analyze our data properly and using the proper tools and techniques. Different analytical tools present overlapping functions and limitations. Of course, like I said, you might use one tool to analyze different things. And we are not saying that a particular tool is the best. There are some limitations. There are limitations in every tool that we use. When we do research, we should ensure that those limitations as minimal as possible. When we're analyzing data, they are as minimal as possible to avoid this bias. We should look for the best possible tool with the least number of limitations. In that case, we'll have a good result, or our results will be good. Nevertheless, data analysis reveals the trend, pattern, occurrences of events for sustainable decisions. Again, when we do data analysis, we want to look at what is the trend, what is the pattern, and the occurrence of certain things that are happening. How can we predict for tomorrow? Can we make decisions that will be sustainable? Can we make decisions that will not impact on us tomorrow? Can we make decisions that will make things better for us? If the trend is decreasing, if the pattern is in a way, can we do it in such a way that we limit the spread of probably a particular disease? What can we do in that domain? Thank you very much. I will now receive maybe questions and reactions, and if there's anything that I might go back to clarify if there was a mix-up, I'm available.
Thank you, Dr. Kometa. We gave you a very big task to do this overview in a very short time, and you've done an excellent job. A couple of sort of housekeeping things. One is that we are hearing from people who are using screen readers that the chat is interfering with the screen reader of the main presentation. So I think going forward, we are going to stop using the chat function unless we are in this kind of discussion. And those of you who are using screen readers, I'll just ask for some feedback about that as we go along. So it is helpful to have a chat happening because it allows us to collect comments and questions. But if it is interfering with people who are using screen readers, then it's not so inclusive and accessible. So I think what might work is that you could send a private message to myself or whoever's moderating the session, and then we can convey that. So we have some really interesting questions and comments. We know from our earlier poll that people are in various places in terms of their experience with data analysis and with research generally. So I'm looking at the questions and comments that people have put. I think we're going to start with one that comes from Ellen, who says, can you please describe an example of data analysis that you have done? I think people would like to hear about some of your own work. So if you could give us an example of one of your projects, that would be great.
Okay. For example, most of the times I use regression correlation analysis. Correlation analysis to maybe look at relationship between two things, two variables. At times, I use time series analysis. I will take an example. Maybe this is not, I will take an example from one that I did, looking at the relationship between occurrence of natural hazards and how people are affected. Or maybe let me take another one. I want to look at relationship between climate variability and agriculture. I use correlation analysis. I use correlation analysis to see, is there a relationship between rainfall, variability, and agricultural production, for example. Again, I want to look at flood occurrence and agricultural calendar in a particular place. Again, I use correlation analysis to do that. I want to see if the flood waters affect the type of crops that are cultivated. Here again, we use correlation analysis. I can also use time series. I use time series analysis in some cases when I was looking at recurrence of natural hazards within the Mount Cameroon region. At what time? I want to see how often, how frequent do we have these hazards occurring in this particular area? What are the causes? What are the causes? So these are some of the things that I use, but I've used quite a number, but these are the few that I can cite here.
That's great. And we have included some of your articles in the resource list if people are interested in more information. Leslie is suggesting that maybe we could have a question and answer with audio rather than using the chat. So I think we'll do both. We know that some people do not have audio access, and we'll still need to use the chat. But Leslie, you had a question about knowing the how to decide on what kind of data to use. Would you like to ask your question with audio, please?
I wanted to, what I meant by the Q&A was actually like a Q&A box instead, because Zoom has this feature where you can have the chat box and the Q&A box, and usually that one doesn't pop up when you, like when someone writes a question that it doesn't appear on the screen. So I was just thinking maybe in that case it also might not appear in the case of the media, but I'm not sure. So that was the suggestion I was making there. And my question was, yeah, like since you mentioned there's like many versions of like SPS and SPS and all those different data analysis tools, how do you determine as a beginner like which one you have to go for? Like what are the things you take into consideration to determine that?
Okay, it all depends on what you want to do, because when you have your hypothesis all set up, it is possible for you when you go through all the statistical tools, you look through, you try to look for the one that best suits what you want to do, and that has the least number of limitations that you want to use. It's difficult for like SPSS for me to say exactly that this is the best one that you use for this particular research method or analysis. It all depends on what you want to do and which one best suits what you want to do. It's really difficult for me to really like give a precise answer to that particular aspect about SPSS.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to share some comments about their responses to making a decision about what kind of data to collect when you're beginning a project? What do you think about?
Hello, Lynn.
Go ahead, Julius.
Yes, this is Julius. So I think as Dr. Kometa mentioned, he talked about, let's say, for instance, qualitative research, focusing on like the why questions and things like that. So if that would depend also, it would depend on, first of all, the aim of the research and then the questions that come out of the research. Based on that, then you will be able to know exactly what design would have for the research, which would determine also the type of data that will be collected. Now, if we wanted to understand in depth what people's experiences are, for instance, in accessing different services, then you might be able to do things like interviews. And if you're doing an interview, then that means that you're collecting qualitative data. And collecting qualitative data, then you might have different ways of doing that. For instance, you could, it could be a phone call, and then you record the conversations, and then you transcribe it, and then you have the qualitative data that you can now start, coding. But on the other hand, if, for instance, you wanted to find out like the how many, which is like quantitative, or you wanted to get some to know if there's any difference between two. Now we are talking about, for instance, let me give the situation that we currently have, the pandemic COVID-19, and some of the researchers have produced some vaccines, and then you wanted to find out which vaccine works better than the other, or if there is any difference in the results from the two vaccines, for instance, then that will be some quantitative data that will be collected. You maybe administer these vaccines, then you collect the information about the effectiveness of each of the vaccines. Then you now do some statistical analysis, and Dr. Kometa mentioned using SAS. You might have other tools that could be used. Then you look at the differences in the treatments. Maybe you want to look at the variance, or so that's we don't go so detailed into those, but there are different options that you can use. So the questions that you have, the aim of the research, the questions, then start leading you now to think about what type of design do I want to to bring out of this, and then now determining how do I go about collecting the data. And then if you know exactly what type of data you want to collect, then you will be able now to choose the tools that are available to you. So for now, I think that's what I can say about that. But there are other presentations as well that also, I think, bring more clarity in other aspects of data analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, Julius. Very helpful. Anyone else want to comment on the process that they use as they're starting a project?
Hello, Lynn. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Nine. Go ahead, please.
Okay, I'd like to quickly comment on the method that we used during our disability project because we were looking at the experiences of children living with disability. We wanted to get their stories, we wanted to get their real life situation. So we picked qualitative data wherein we did key informal interviews and focus group discussions and recorded the interviews so that we get what they are saying word for word, and then we analyze it from there. And like Dr. Kometa said, quantitative data is picking statistics, is to record statistics, to maybe numbers. You just want to have a quick view. You don't want to go to have an in-depth of what you're trying to research about. So I just wanted to comment on that.
Thank you. So again, really thinking about what is it that you want to focus on in a particular project, and what kind of information are you trying to collect and come out with? What kind of outcomes? Elizabeth from Ghana is asking, can you use correlation analysis for a qualitative research study? Would you like to respond to that, Dr. Kometa?
Yeah, it's possible to use correlation analysis for qualitative data, because you might have you might want to look at the relationship, and when you use, for example, audios, videos, interviews, you might have people's views, and then probably maybe you take two groups of people. You want to see what do they think, and of course you relate that to the other group, and try to look at relationship, if they agree or disagree in what the question said were.
It would depend, though, on how you set up the data, how you collect it.
It would depend on how you set up the data. It depends on how you set up your questions, and what you want to do, and that one will help you do the correlation between the two groups.
So it's something to think about if you're doing a study, because often qualitative studies will have smaller numbers of people, which might not have the statistical power that you would need to do an adequate statistical analysis. Plus, there are many other considerations.
It might have a smaller number, but it also depends on your target population. Maybe your target population was not to have a very large number, but with a small population, you can see the correlation analysis. It all depends on your target population.
So some really interesting discussion. And we hope that people are thinking about their projects. We have a couple more minutes if anyone has any other comments or questions. Okay.
Yes, Lynn.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Vitalis. I just want to ask if it's possible to have qualitative and quantitative data on one research.
It is.
It is possible. It is
Go ahead,
possible.
Dr.
It's possible. It's possible to have the two. It's possible to have the two. Like I said before, when you are doing research, you should know that you will not depend solely on one. You might use the two. At most times you use the two. But if you want to do qualitative alone, fine. But most of the times you should be ready to use the two.
Well, I think I'm going to qualify you on that, Dr. Kometa. I think it very much depends on the researcher and the research team. There are many researchers who believe strongly in one or the other tradition and who have really focused on just doing a particular approach using qualitative methods or just using quantitative methods. Not everyone uses both methods. And it's important to think about the underlying philosophies that drive the different research approaches. Because the philosophy underlying the research approach is really important to consider. And we'll have a little bit more discussion about that in our next session as we hear from some researchers. Alvin is asking what you would call a research that has both qualitative and quantitative. We would call it a mixed methods study or a mixed methods approach. Dr. Okwen Patrick will be talking about his approach using mixed methods in our next session. In many projects, there can be very heated discussion about whether there should actually be mixed methods and what that would look like. I remember one big project I was involved in looking at the experience of injured workers. And we had, in our team, we had many discussions about whether or not it was important to do a big survey because people felt that the survey with limited questions would not actually give the information that they wanted. And I think there are a couple of other questions. We just have 1 minute to go. Che Dieudonné is asking, are there any data analysis projects where one approach is preferred over another? The short answer is yes, very much so. And it really depends on the researcher and the research team. Leslie, do you still have your hand up?
Oh no, I forgot to take it.
Okay, your hand is down. That's great. Well, please join me in thanking Dr. Kometa for getting us started. You have raised so many important concepts. You've given us a lot to think about. And we are really grateful for this start to our discussions. Any other comments?
No, thank you very much. And I think this was simply an opening for people to maybe pick up on what we try to maybe present now, and then we develop from there. Because I think from the subsequent sessions and discussions, we should be able to develop from what I've presented. I think this is just probably just a tip of the iceberg. I think people will have more to say, and we are looking forward to the other sessions.
Great. Thank you very much. You can see in the chat, there's many thanks to you. So we will take a 10-minute break and we'll start again at the top of the hour. Thank you all very much. Come back in 10 minutes.
Thank you.